Welcome into Daily Insider. Stephanie Otey here, filling in for Kevin Rogers again, out all week for the remainder of the week. But we have NBA playoffs looming. We got one more night of play-ins, and then we are underway with the best part of the NBA season. And the best person to talk about it, we've had him on several times. No, he's not an actor. He's a great handicapper. Chris Farley from Odds Breakers, coming on Vegas Insider a bunch lately. We were just talking about it. Your record, 490 and 375 in the past two NBA seasons. I'm also looking at this past year. In 2021, a 58% hit rate. The year after that, 56% hit rate. I mean, you are just nailing it.
I appreciate that, Stephanie. I don't know why I fell in love with NBA handicapping. Maybe because I played in the past. I don't know. But it's something that I really enjoy, and I've had some success. Obviously, I don't know if it's going to last, throughout my whole career. That's a tough mark to keep hitting, but hopefully it does.
I honestly think it's harder to bet in basketball. I prefer football because it goes better for me. But NBA is the harder one. But you also place 5th overall in Circa for football season. I wanted to ask you, is it like a little club, like a fraternity for the guys at the top? Do you all know each other?
I gotta say, so far I've definitely met a few folks who have won before.
Wow.
Obviously, most famously, Las Vegas Chris, who's become a friend of mine. He's won several of those competitions, kind of a legend in that sphere. But yeah, there was a nice little celebration at the end. Got to handshake and network a little bit. And it feels like it should be, kind of like a Hall of Fame class, right? It is tough to win that or to place anywhere like in the top 10, especially. And the NFL is arguably some of the sharpest lines of any sport, right? So it was definitely a good year for me and my buddy Steve. And who knows, maybe we can have a repeat performance.
Yeah, I wonder if it gets very competitive amongst you guys, especially with Chris that you were talking about getting all heated in competition. Are you guys like tracking each other's records as well?
Not quite yet, but I might have. It's really tough. Yeah, it's tough too because I should have only bet my Circa picks last year, right? We hit 68%. Of course, I didn't just bet that, but maybe that's the theory for this year. But it's interesting because you have to stick to your own process, but you also want to be open to what others are doing and their insights. The contests are different, that's for sure, because reasonably you could not have a great season, but if you're beating everyone else, then you're not bad.
Do you tend to take any props or do you mainly stick to sides, totals?
NFL, I usually stick to traditional sides and totals. Of course, there's, throw some teasers in there. Everybody loves a teaser. I'm not a huge prop guy. And I have to say, what's really weird is in the NBA, for as good as my handicapping has gone, I am not good at like NBA fantasy or like NBA daily fantasy and DraftKings. I don't know what's going on there, but I can't figure that out. So I've all but given up on that side. But yeah, tough to not take props in both sports, but I'm usually just a traditional handicapper, sides and totals.
Yeah, I try to stay away from parlays because they've just not been working. But then Vegas Insider will post like one hitting, and I'm like, if I just keep doing it, it will hit eventually, and I'll make all the money I've been betting on parlays. I'll make it back in one swoop. So it's kind of like going for the lottery. I feel like I'm just got to keep doing it until I finally hit. But hey, that's gambling for you. Okay, but I want to look at some of the games we have ahead. Obviously, we don't have games tonight, but we do have the final play-in rounds tomorrow, and then we get into the actual playoffs. Before we even get into it, are you in favor of these play-ins? It's newer, but opens the door up more,
Yeah, I like it. We've seen some great games, that's for sure, right? Just a lot of close games. Obviously, the crowd getting into it for some teams like Minnesota who haven't been to the playoffs in a few years. So I think it creates more competition in the NBA. If these 7 and 8 seeds are as solid as they should be, right, then they'll still get into the playoffs in the 9th and 10th teams. And we're seeing some of that disparity between the 9th and 10th teams and the 7th and 8th. We'll see what happens on Friday, but it looks like those top tier teams are there for a reason.
Yep, Friday is the win or go home. Atlanta Hawks, they finished strong. They finished in their last 10 games. They were 8, and then you have the Cavs who have been a little bit off lately. When you compare the two teams, the Hawks are 3rd in offensive rating, 15 in defensive rating. Comparatively, Cleveland is 19th and 21st in those respective categories. I look at these teams and I feel like they're going different directions. Are you in the same boat here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really like the Hawks tomorrow night, even though they're on the road, even though they have a little less rest, right? There's just too many skilled shooters on this Hawks team, especially for the Cleveland offense to keep up with. I mean, the Hawks shot 50% from beyond the arc against the Hornets. And obviously, the Hornets last night didn't offer a lot of resistance. I'm expecting a little more from Cleveland, but this is par for the course for the Hawks. I mean, they average 118 points since the All-Star break. And what worries me about betting on Cleveland here is that's a very mediocre three-point defense, and they're not a three-point shooting team. They're 22nd in the NBA in 3 points attempted per game. So, I mean, the Hawks, they're clearly in rhythm. They're confident. I mean, even their bigs, who have been pretty inconsistent this year, they played a lot better last night. They played aggressive. And when the Hawks are shooting lights out from the perimeter and playing bully ball, playing more physical in the playoffs, that's a really hard team to beat. And especially the Trae Young factor. I mean, the confidence and experience that he's bringing now, of course, after the Hawks went to the playoffs last year, played at Madison Square Garden. That was a show to watch. And people forget that Nate McMillan, who stepped in halfway through the season last year for the Hawks as their coach, he was a world-class defender when in his NBA career. So he can teach them better defense. Their defense can step up. I just don't think the Cavs are quite there yet. I mean, it's a young team. It's an inexperienced team. Obviously, they're going to have the home court advantage, but yeah, 17th in offensive efficiency, 24th in defensive efficiency since the All-Star break. They might get Jared Allen back for this game, but I don't think it matters. I think the Hawks stay in rhythm in this one, and it's only around 2.5, 3 points right now on the Hawks, so you're still getting a pretty short line. There's still plenty of value there.
Yeah, I was just looking at the status of Jared Allen. They're saying he continues to progress. He's able to use his left hand. That's the one where he fractured the middle finger. During intense workouts, he's able to use it, but I'm hearing it's probably 50-50. And so that's obviously something that the Cavs don't want to hear. He's like their Hail Mary. They're saving grace on defense. So when you look at the way these two teams stack up, they got two young stars. Who do you think will step up? Do you think it'll be Darius Garland, or do you think it'll be Trae Young? If you're looking at
Darius Garland has, he certainly had to shoulder the load for the Cavs, but I can't trust Garland over Trae Young in these situations, especially because Trae Young, of course, he still had a great game, a lot of assists against the Hornets, but really, especially in that first half, he wasn't shooting very well. So you could almost expect some positive regression from Trae Young in this game. Darius Garland has played great because he's had to. And, Jared Allen, if he steps into this game, he's still going to step into a cold. It is not easy playing with a hurt finger of any kind, especially in basketball, right? That ball is always bouncing off your hand. You need it for the arc of the shot. So, I mean, Jared Allen would definitely cause an uptick in their potential on defense, but that's really only in the front court. The Cavs are going to have to really cover the many, many shooters on the Hawks that can nail those three-point shots. And between Trae Young facilitating and all the shooters they have, I can't like the Cavs in this one. I mean, it's a little tempting, right? They are at home. They have a little more rest, and they did have a great start to the year. But this is a team on a spiral, I think, a downward spiral.
Yeah, and I took the Hawks total under last night. Obviously, the over hit. So I think I'm leaning more towards the over for this game. Atlanta, they've scored 113 points or more in each of their wins since March 11th. And I don't think that Cleveland's defense can stop them or slow them down. So do you like the over here too?
I lean towards the over, but we've seen in a lot of these games, right, especially the playing games, these totals have gone under. I'm not sure which line you got.
Supposed to last night, and they didn't.
Yeah, what's the line you got on that one?
The total last night, I would have to look at what I got it at. It was like only like 5 or 6 points over, but the total was 235. I think I got it like 226 or something like that.
Yeah. Total. Oh, okay. So yeah, wow, you got a low line there. The closing line, I still got 235.5 last night, so it still dropped under that. But a lot of these, typically in the playoffs in general, right? Tempo slows down. You see offensive efficiency kind of decrease a little bit because there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of nerves on these players to step up and to have poise in these high intensity situations. And then it kind of favors the defense, right? Defense can kind of get in their spots and play better. So it's no surprise that a lot of unders are hitting. This one is a little different, though. I mean, this line is pretty sharp at 223. So I think it's about right. But I agree with you. I would have to lean with the over here, especially if Jared Allen comes back in this game. at least the Cavs are going to have an advantage in the front court, or at least they should. And the Hawks definitely have advantage on the perimeter.
Yeah, so if they win, they'd be going up against Miami. It's impressive that they made it to that first seed, considering that 4 of their best players were in and out with injuries and what they've overcome. Atlanta, though, to pull off an upset, I think, against the Heat, Trae Young would really have to go off, but they are a great offensive team, number 2 in offensive efficiency. So how do you think this one would fare out if Atlanta does indeed move on?
Yeah, it's tough. I really liked what I was seeing from the Hawks, obviously, and how they step up in some of these situations. The thing that concerns me about the Heat, and there's not a lot that concerns me about the Heat. That is a very well-balanced team. They're great on defense. They're good from the three-point shot. Obviously, they're good from the two-point shot with Bam Adebayo in the mid-range game. But they really don't have like a go-to clutch shooter. I guess it would be Jimmy Butler, but he's not always consistent in that area. Tyler Hero has been amazing this year off the bench, so maybe he becomes that clutch shooter. But we've seen him struggle in the playoffs, especially last year. Whereas, again, Trae Young, there's something about that kid where he does not get shook in these big game situations. I don't think he's going to get shook in Miami either. So I think it's going to be probably a closer series than people may think. I could see the Hawks grabbing a few of these games because of that prolific offense that they have. But, I mean, ultimately, the Heat are the number 1 seed in the NBA for a reason. They went through a lot of injuries, a lot of COVID stuff, just like every team has this year. And really their star players all on the same court together haven't played that much this year. So as long as the chemistry is there for this team, I would expect the Heat to take the series. But like I said, I think it's going to be a little bit more of a battle than people are estimating.
I think that some people are looking at the playoffs from last year and how the Hawks move forward. I mean, that's actually stepping into my opinion too, is when I'm weighing the deck here, I'm like, oh, well, they really showed up last year and then Giannis happened. But even when he was injured, that was remarkable. So when you look at that series last year, Bucks and Hawks, and it really looked like it could have gone Atlanta's way for a part of it. I was in Atlanta at the time. The city was very excited, but do you think that weighs into the decision-making here too?
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta, again, playoff experience is absolutely huge, right? We're seeing the difference here, right? You see a team like the Hornets last night, right? They barely showed up to that game. And they didn't play a lot of defense in that game, that's for sure. Look at how the Cavs responded on Tuesday with their youth and lack of experience. The Hawks are more battle tested than a lot of these playoff teams, and to go against Giannis and Milwaukee last year in the playoffs and to be as competitive as they were, do I think a team like the Bucks is still going to best them? Probably. I think the Bucks are my favorite to win the East again. But yeah, this is a Hawks team that if they gain some rhythm, right, if they gain some momentum, it's a dangerous team because there's not a lot of offenses in the entire NBA really that can hang with them when they are in rhythm. It's just going to come down to how well these teams defend the perimeter. And we've seen, to your point too, with the Bucks this year, they have not covered that three-point shot very well on defense. They're kind of allowing teams to have a lot of space. Now I expect that to change in the playoffs as a lot of defense changes in the playoffs. But again, Trae creates so many opportunities there. Either he's going to shoot it or he's going to create an assist opportunity for one of his lethal shooters. So again, I think the Hawks they're going to hang with a lot of teams this year, as long as they can make it past tomorrow's game, obviously.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the props, but I kind of would like to take the under points for Butler, shooting just 23 from 3. You were talking about how it's been inefficient for him. His mid-range shooting hasn't been much better. And you also talked about Tyler Hero, and he can create offensively, but can it compare to what Trae Young can do and open things up offensively? So if you're comparing the two there and looking at props, who do you think you would take the over on?
Between Trae Young and Jimmy?
Between Trae Young and Butler. Like if you were to take when I look at Trae Young's points, I'd be inclined to take the over because of the way he plays in the postseason. And Butler, the way he's played all season long, I think it could fall short.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the one thing that the Heat can do really well is they can live in that mid-range game, right? Jimmy Butler is fantastic from there. But yeah, I mean, I'd probably still have to lean towards Trae. There's a different confidence to Trae when he shoots the ball. There's like a swagger out there. It kind of reminds you a little bit of Allen Iverson. and some of the players from the past that he's really trying to emulate, and he's doing it really well. Jimmy Butler is great for a lot of reasons on the Heat. He's probably their on-court leader. He's tough. He's blue collar. That kind of lays the foundation for the attitude that they have. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking pure points every game, especially if they're lined in a similar way, which they probably won't be, Trae Young will probably be predicted to have more points, but still, Trae Young is going to have to come up huge in those games against the Heat. The Heat are a very, very good defense, especially when they clamp down in the playoffs. So the Hawks are going to overly rely on Trae Young, whereas the Heat don't have to overly rely on Jimmy.
Yep. The other playing game for Friday is Pelicans and Clippers. I took Pelicans to cover against the Timberwolves. Timberwolves got the best of them. But the Clippers, they could be a dark horse this year in playoffs. I think that, it's all Suns, but it's pretty locked up. Like the Suns are going to take the West. But do you think that a team could open it up, and do you think the Clippers could be that dark horse?
I really want to think that. That's what I was thinking heading into the playoffs too, because there's sort of a lot of excitement for the Clippers right now, right? Paul George came back recently, and I think people sort of underestimate too what he brings for that defense. He's one of the better NBA defenders of all time. If you look up his overall stats and defensive ratings, and of course he brings a lot of prowess on the offensive side as well. So this is a Clippers team that has had to survive and stay afloat all year without their stars. Now they get Paul George back, takes a little pressure off of the supporting cast of Paul George. I don't think that Kawhi is going to return, unfortunately, in the playoffs. Just the whispers that I've heard suggest not. But yeah, this is absolutely a dangerous team. And you look at them in those first 3 quarters against the Timberwolves, and it feels kind of lucky that the Timberwolves won that game. They allowed Anthony Edwards to kind of step back and have his way from beyond the arc, and he stepped up and he produced and got a lot of points there in the fourth quarter for the Timberwolves and carried them. But this Clippers defense especially is, it's no joke. They could really clamp you down. They could really stop those perimeter shots, in particular, probably some of the best wing defense in the NBA. They can just throw one guy after you after another. That's a look ahead bet for me tomorrow too. The Pelicans ran very slow in that game last night against the Spurs, which was brilliant for them, right? They wanted to slow down that game so that the Spurs weren't controlling the tempo and running up and down the floor like San Antonio likes to do. Only 95 possessions for the Pelicans yesterday. The Clippers are used to that kind of basketball. They only average 97 possessions per game since the All-Star break. So these are two very slow teams that I think are going to have a lot of matchup advantages on defense. Kind of like the under tomorrow. I know it's low. It's around 216, but it is dropping for a reason. And I still think that's the play for tomorrow night. What
number did you get it at?
I got it at 216.5, which is probably a little late. I think it came out like 217 or more. But now I'm seeing it at most books is like 216. I would only forecast that that's going to drop even more. Who knows? There's just not a lot of reasons to like the over in that one. These are two slow-paced teams, and they match up well on defense against each other.
Yeah, and I think the Pelicans just kind of gave up towards the end. They're just like, I'm done with this season. That's what it seems like. But you mentioned Kawhi Leonard. I don't think he's coming back either. They tried to supplement him with Norman Powell and Robert Covington. But what I like on the Pelicans is I'm a big fan of CJ McCollum. I liked him with Portland. He's an Ohio guy. But still, they were able to get to the play without Zion Williamson. I think McCollum had a lot to do with that. But like you mentioned, Paul George coming back was huge. Just looking at the numbers since he returned, Clippers are number 1 in offensive rating, 6 in defensive rating, net rating, top. They're at the top, and effective field goal percentage number 3. So he's a huge addition, and I think that that'll get them through. With the spread at 3.5, I think it's easy for me to take Clippers to cover there. The spread though, or the total, the total has not gone my way. For the Final Four in March Madness, and it hasn't since these play-ins. So I don't know. I don't know if I can get back onto the total train at 216 too. It feels it does feel low. It does feel a little bit low, but I don't think the Pelicans are going to put up some big numbers. So I probably won't take the total, but I would, if I would, it would be the over. I think it's just too low for me.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting opportunity for maybe a parlay too, right? If you like
Oh
the
God.
Clippers in this one, well, the correlated parlays are good, right? They make sense. So it's
Yes.
like, I mean, if you think the Clippers can control this game, especially on defense, then maybe like a money line Clippers and then the under, something like that. At least they are related in some way. Who doesn't love a parlay, right? But sometimes we give ourselves in trouble when we're trying to take too many parlays. But that one makes sense. And I know it's low, but the interesting thing about totals like that is when they go sky high, they usually go over. When they go really low, they usually still fall under because the books are, anticipating, they're trying to get people to take more of the overs, right? Like in a situation with a short line. So anything can happen in the playoffs. I mean, with my luck, this game will go into overtime, and it'll blast away over 216. But
With your luck, number 5 in circa.
Yeah.
With my luck, if you had my luck, yes, it certainly would. What was the best parlay? What's the best parlay you've had? I've had 2 parlay leg hits, but 3 and I'm done. I get greedy and I'm like, oh, I see the numbers go up, and once I add in that 3rd leg, it's a bust.
Yeah, that's tough to say because back in the day when I didn't really learn the proper tactics to win long term in sports betting, I would bet a lot of parlays. So in short, I made a lot of mistakes. But there have definitely been some 8-team, 9-team, 10-team parlays that of course it only happens like twice a year or something. But when you hit it,
so good.
Twice a year is pretty good.
Right? That's so very good.
But at the time, I was probably only dropping like $10 bets, so I probably didn't win very much. But yeah, but I mean, I don't know the most successful parlay that I've ever had, but usually I try to keep it to correlated parlays, just because at this point, it's at least long term is going to be more financially beneficial if I try to stick to that. Am I perfect at that? Absolutely not. But I try to. But it's definitely, to your point too. Maybe tomorrow night. A parlay also on the Hawks and the Clippers winning straight up. Money line parlay would get you plus money there.
I do like that. But Hawks and Clippers, that's 2 favorites. I think it would be better to do that than to take them individually. I'd have to.
Right.
Yeah, I did that. I did that in March Madness and it did work. But I was hedging it because I liked North Carolina, and then I was like, all right, I had to hedge it a bit. So I got it basically just because I needed to even out my bet slip, so it wasn't so heavy on North Carolina for the Final Four. But yeah, so but it did work. It did save me on some other side bets that I made. So I like it. I think I probably will do that because when you look at taking 2 favorites, you're like, and then if you parlay it, it does make it a lot better. So I actually probably will do that. But I'm not.
It's a good little hedge too, right? If you like,
definitely not doing that. Okay, looking forward to the actual playoffs. The big story around the Mavs is obviously Luka. It's kind of sad how this ended. He's just too important to that team and the calf strain. I was just looking up like the most recent update, and the Woj Bob was it's skeptical. So that obviously we'll see the numbers shift on the books there. But as it's looking now, how do you even bet on this one when it's a 50-50, they're saying, for Luka? And if he's on the court, what percentage is he even going to be at? Definitely want to be 100%.
Right. Yeah. Well, on the one hand, I want to believe that obviously these are prodigy athletes, right? They're amazing. They find ways to play through these injuries, like Giannis last year, right? Who, I mean, what did he tear his like PCL or his MCL apparently or something, and still like play through it and
50 points.
yeah, exactly. So there's a chance that happens with Luka. But the thing about the Mavericks that I like in general is this. I mean, a lot of people not talking about the Mavericks too. They've only lost 6 games since the All-Star break, only lost 12 games since the start of the calendar year. This team has gone 36-12 since the start of January. This is just a team that's finding ways to win, and that's coming off. That run sort of started off of a Luka injury, and then they had a big COVID hit to their team. And then they just kind of found their stride. Obviously, after the trade that they made too with Spencer Dinwiddie, which has done a lot of great things for that team. Spencer Dinwiddie is a great player. And when him and Brunson are on the court in particular, their plus point differential is massive. So what I really like about the Mavericks is even without Luka, they stayed afloat with him there for about 10 games out in the middle of the season. They do have more depth these days than I think they're given credit for. Players like Dwight Powell is playing much more aggressive on defense. Looks like he hasn't sustained any of those injuries that we thought that he might be playing with. Dorian Finney-Smith has been great. Bullock, I talked about Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie coming off the bench. This is just a deeper team. Even players like Marquise Chris, who came in, was picked up, I believe, off of a 10-day contract, but he really stepped up for the Mavericks as well. Even at plus 4.5, even without or with the possibility that Luka doesn't play in this game, I still think it could be a smart idea just to take a small bet on the Mavericks now, just in case he does play, and just in case they can still be feisty even without him, right? This is a Jazz team who, in particular, their defensive efficiency ratings have dropped. And they're just not playing as a cohesive unit. So I think it's really possible that the Mavs catch the Jazz here early, even without Luka. They are at home, right? And they have been surging now for a good half a year. So it's just a team I really like, and it's kind of sad for me too, because, man, I was really hoping to put a lot of futures bets on the Mavericks, but not looking as great if Luka's banged up.
Yeah, obviously I love the Mavs getting my start there. The year that they drafted Luka, Dirk heads out. Yeah, that's when I was there, and it was like this big hope for the Mavs, and it's just it's like kind of like that throughout Dallas with the Cowboys too, but when you look at the way they did go down the stretch after that All-Star break, you mentioned the 9-1 home record. That includes a 14-point win over the Utah Jazz just last month. Again, a healthy Luka, but when you're making these odds here right now for the West, for the Mavericks to win, it'd be plus 1,800. And the West isn't loaded like the East, so it does look like it could be valuable. You said you were looking at futures for the Mavs? I mean, the Suns, it's so hard to bet against the Suns, but
yeah,
plus 1,800 for the Mavs right now. And if you could get Luka healthy, and he also has like about almost a week in between those games, an injury like that on your cap, it may take more. But like you mentioned, when these athletes at that caliber level, they'll play through anything, no matter how much pain. It's more of a mental game. Like, how much can you endure?
Yeah, absolutely. And Luka has a way about him too, where it seems like he can, he knows how to just be efficient with his body. He's not like a rapid movement kind of guy. It's kind of like a James Harden. He just kind of lulls you to sleep, and finds ways to move into the front court too, or pops back and takes those threes. So I don't know if anybody can maybe physically get over it and find out a way to still play at a really high level. It probably is Luka. Certainly seems like a tough kid too. I mean, this kid has been playing basketball professionally since he was like 15 or 16. So he's been here before. He knows how to get around these things. That's what I want to believe, Stephanie. And yes, I did take a futures on the Mavericks, just one unit at plus 1,300. Man, I wish I got the line where it is now, but of course that was prior to the Luka injury. But I still think that there's some value there too. To your point, this is not a West that's as intimidating as it used to be. And like I said, the Mavs have just found ways to win games the second half of the season. And in the second half, too, they're one of the best defenses in the NBA in the fourth quarter, especially. They are locking teams down. And those are the things you want to see coming into the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think that they're beyond saving. When you look at their record without Luka, they went 8-9 without him in the lineup. That doesn't help the case for the Mavs, but it's not like they're getting obliterated. Granted, he is the guy of the team, but like you mentioned, they built around him. I think that they could compete in the West, but to win it all in a 7-game series, they would have to have him in. I think even if he goes in and he's not 100%, I would take the Mavs to win the series, maybe within 6 games. But when you're looking at each game night to night, you're just going to have to dive deep into that, the roster, the lineup, all of that heading into it. And usually you don't get those until like an hour or two before tip. So that's something you're just going to have to regularly keep an eye on out West. And I want it for the Mavs, especially the value you can get them at right now. Do you have anything on the total with that one? It's at 213.5. That's low.
Yeah, that's low. I don't have anything on the total right now. I mean, I'd probably still look at that under because of the way that the Mavericks have slowed down games, especially in the second half. Like maybe a good way to look at that game is as long as the Mavs play like they have. I mean, in general, they'll kind of play by the pace of the other team in the first half, and then they really slow it down in the second half. So maybe look at, like a first half over, full game under, or maybe you can look to live bet the game under if it starts off really fast because because it's the playoffs, right? Because of the nerves that are a part of these games and because of how the pace slows and because of what the Mavericks have shown us, I really expect the game to slow down eventually. The Jazz are probably going to try and throw off the Mavericks, especially if Luka's not in, to try and overwhelm them. But again, these Jazz just don't look like they're as in sync as they have been before. And they're usually regular season juggernauts. So the fact that they're kind of stumbling into the playoffs, how are they going to look now? It's just a team I don't trust.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at either of those two being a dark horse, I think Clippers look good, but the Jazz earlier, like at the All-Star break, there was talk about them being a dark horse over even the Grizzlies, I think. And I wasn't too hot on Utah at the time, but I think that the Mavs could best them even without Luka, but in a 7-game series, that one gets me a little bit nervous. Another matchup out west on Saturday, Timberwolves versus the Grizzlies, who are a 7.5-point favorite. A little bit long considering the Timberwolves just beat the Clippers, but you got Ja Morant on there. And even as we're talking with your best player, playing without your best player, the Grizzlies still went 20-5 without him. So whether or not he's on the court, they're still a well-rounded team. So I think that he's just that X factor that is going to be harder to get through.
Yeah, and everything that I said about the unders, Stephanie, I'm going to go against everything I just said because because these are two teams who, they're top 3 in the NBA since the All-Star break in pace. They're top 5 top 10 and since the All-Star break in offense, right? These are just two of the most explosive, fast-paced teams in the NBA. And typically, especially in a 7-game series where you see these teams where they know, right, it doesn't all come down to one game. So they're going to play more their style of basketball. Even though things tend to slow down and defense tends to show up more in the playoffs, I still have to look at the overs in these contests, especially in the first quarter and first half. Both of these teams have always exploded all season in those first 2 quarters on offense, and their defense really isn't all there. So I don't know. I think this is going to be, first of all, a really exciting series to watch, right? I mean, young teams, not a lot of playoff experience, but that's not going to matter because they're both facing each other. So they're kind of even there, and both just exciting teams with explosive athletes. You got Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, Russell on the other end, who really held his team up the other night, and then you have Ja Morant, who's my favorite player in the NBA right now, who leads a team that can explode into the front court. They're number 1 in the NBA in paint points. And that's an area where Minnesota is not particularly talented on defense. So I think there's a lot of matchup advantages for the Grizzlies on offense and for the Timberwolves on offense. Timberwolves can hit those threes, and we saw that against the Clippers. When they get hot, they stay hot. So I don't think I'll be looking at any unders in this series, although we've seen still unders take place between two really high-scoring, high-tempo teams in the past, but this one feels like one is just going to cultivate the other.
Yeah, the totals for me are, and that one's at 234.5 right now. You mentioned the studs with the Timberwolves, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell. When they get together, they boast a top 10 record in the NBA. Towns, you mentioned a 60-point game that he had just back in March. But the talk of the town when they played the Clippers was Karl Anthony Towns was getting bullied. He doesn't like to get physical. Do you think that has a factor here when going up against the Grizzlies?
Yeah, definitely. The Grizzlies love to attack that paint. So Karl Anthony Towns is going to have to expect some physicality, right? In that sense, I really liked his attitude this year. He's kind of playing with a chip on his shoulder. Seems like maybe he's taking the next level in his game. But you can't enter the playoffs and, not want to encounter that kind of physicality or maybe shy away from it, especially against a team like the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, John Morant, all 180 pounds of him, he's going to come straight at you, and he's going to try and dunk the ball on you, or he's going to dish it out to one of his other key players. And it's like every one of the starting players on the Grizzlies, and even from the bench, they're all young, they're all thick, they're all explosive, athletic. It's almost like a football team out there. So I could definitely see the Grizzlies bullying the Timberwolves, and especially Karl Anthony Towns, if he doesn't step up in these situations in the future. Of course, the Clippers are kind of, they kind of lead the pack when it comes to that kind of physicality, them and the Heat and the Celtics. So they might not see the same level, but I don't know. I mean, I definitely have some concern for Karl Anthony Towns. I think if he stays in that game in the fourth quarter against the Clippers, I think the Clippers may win that game because he was really struggling.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the matchup too, if you're taking a side, Minnesota was able to beat Memphis twice this season, and one of those times was by 43 points. And then one of its losses to the Grizzlies was in overtime. And so the spread right now is at 7.5 in favor of Memphis. That's a tricky one. Do you have a side here? I mean, it's pretty long.
Yeah, it's a pretty big line for an opening playoff game. I think some of that is based off of maybe the fortune or the luck that the Timberwolves saw against the Clippers. Not to take anything away from Minnesota. Anthony Edwards certainly stepped up in the second half, and Russell in the first. But the Grizzlies are going to be rested. John Morant is going to be back. This is a team that has had a lot of momentum and chemistry for a long time now. Talk about futures. I did take a very small play on a Grizzlies future to win it all. I think it was like plus 23 or plus 2,400. Because I think they have the ability. It's a complete team. They're better on defense than people think. So I think this line is actually pretty sharp. I would still have to lean towards the Timberwolves because it is. I mean, that's a lot of points, right? That's a 3-possession game, and it's a Timberwolves team who can kill you from 3-point land, and they run fast. So they're not going to go away easily either. And we saw that in their game against the Clippers. So still probably a lean towards the Timberwolves, but I have to take a deeper look at that one because as far as sides go, I think it's pretty sharp, and I understand why it is where it is.
Yeah, I would probably lean towards Timberwolves to cover, Grizzlies to win it, but the way that the Minnesota beat them, by 43 points, that one stands out to me. And then for them to lose in overtime means that they kept it tight, at least in regulation. So I think that I would probably lean towards Minnesota to cover here. This next matchup for Saturday, talk of the town. Everyone's high on Toronto right now. They think this could be a trap game for the 76ers. I loved Philly ever since the Harden trade. I want to make a case for Embiid for MVP as well. I think all of that even ties into why I still am on 76ers. I love that people are betting on Toronto. That gives me better odds for the Sixers. But I think that all the talk and the doubt is the perfect juice for Embiid, who got snubbed at MVP as we think now. Harden, they don't think that he can play in the playoffs. So I think that they could probably keep that juice going against a team that everyone seems very high on right now.
Yeah, I've been braggadocious about the Raptors now for a little while. So it's kind of cool to see them succeed because I think they're just a sneaky team. I don't think people realize how good they are. But yeah, this is kind of Joel Embiid against the world, right? He's not going to be able to be completely defended or limited, right? In probably any of these games. I mean, he just has so much length and size and talent. Obviously, the season leader in points. Many think that he should have been the MVP. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting series because the Raptors have succeeded against this team in the past, winning 3 out of the 4 games in the regular season, and they have shown that they can play really effective defense against the 76ers. The thing about Harden, too, is he brings that element where, he likes to handle the ball, and he just takes a lot of time with handling the ball, which takes time away from Joel Embiid, who also loves to handle the ball. So I think it might throw off the synchronicity, the chemistry of this team a little bit. And we've seen that later in the season. James Harden, who came in looking like this was the perfect role for him and Joel Embiid really, they're lifting weights after these games. I mean, there's a lot of positive signs for this team. But now it seems like, yeah, I mean, it just seems like things have gone a little clumsy. And the Raptors, if nothing else, they're not a clumsy team. This is a highly disciplined team. They're well coached. They're one of the best defenses in the NBA since the All-Star break. I believe they're third in defensive efficiency overall. Again, not being talked about enough. And I think that Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, I mean, they have more shooting talent, more scoring talent than I think people give them credit for. I think Scotty Barnes should probably be the rookie of the year, actually. He's not going to get it probably, but I think that's going to go to Evan Mobley. But the Raptors just kind of flying under the radar until recently. So I agree with you, Stephanie. You can get more value on the 76ers right now. But I do think it's a tough matchup for Philly. I would not be surprised if the Raptors took the series.
Do you think that when guys lift weights after a game, they're just trying to signal to other teams, or are they just like that juiced up? I've definitely had late night workouts. Like if I was like studying late, or I've definitely done it. If there's a 24-hour gym, then I've definitely done like a 1 a.m. workout. But like after a game, do you think that there's like a subtle message in there?
Yeah, maybe. Like you should probably fear us. We're not going to stop. I think it was interesting to me because James Harden, just the motivation and some of the poise that he has in these spots, especially in the playoffs, like we've seen, not always there. So I thought that he was really showing extra commitment, right, and like extra bonding with Joel Embiid. So that was really great. I'm not sure if they're doing that anymore though. I got to tell you, a team like the Raptors, I don't know if they're going to be very intimidated by it. It's just a team that has a lot of length too. They have like 6 guys that are 6'8" or 6'9", and they just put their arms up and they make it really difficult, especially in the front court. So the 76ers are going to have to be really efficient from the mid-range and from the perimeter against the Raptors if they're going to want to win this series, because they have really not succeeded in that sense in the regular season against this team.
Yeah, everyone was talking about the East seeding and no one wanting to play Brooklyn. And they were in the play-in, and then we look at the Raptors and Sixers were seeded against them. Who do you think had the worst draw when it came to seeding? Like, who do you think has the worst path to go?
Oh, yeah, the hardest path?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, probably the Nets. You're probably right because, now the Nets have to play the Celtics. And if there's any team in the NBA that I don't want to play right now, it's probably the Boston Celtics. I mean, the Celtics have been it's widely known by now, right, that they're probably the best defense in the NBA. Some of the things they've been able to do there, obviously missing Robert Williams III still, and he'll be back at some point as long as they keep on going in the playoffs. But they've been the number one offense for quite a long time now too. And this is a team playing with a ton of confidence. Jason Tatum, he's a stronger version of himself. He's been lifting weights. And just, him and Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart playing some of the best basketball that he's played. He certainly could have been the defensive player of the year. Still could be, I guess. This is just a really complete team. And I give a lot of credit to Ime Udoka, who stepped in as the coach this year. I had a good feeling about him at the start of the year. He brought a culture. He's got like a fighting background or something. So he's just like a big guy who, he looks the part. I think these players want to listen to him. And it's a new culture there in Boston, and it's working for them. And now you got the Nets coming in, who obviously 2 of the best players in the world, arguably maybe the 2 best players in the world, especially in the fourth quarter of these games. But that's really all they have, if you ask me. Seth Curry, they've got some supporting cast members that are good, but they have not been consistent on defense. They've been blowing games in the second half. I mean, almost losing games outright after they've had huge leads. And again, a team that with their stars has not played together for many games this season. So is the chemistry still there? Is it, are they going to be able to step up on defense against some of these great offenses and some of these very complete teams? Celtics are tough. The Celtics are going to be really tough against the Nets. Can the Nets do it because they have 2 of the best players in the world? Sure. But I tend to favor the more complete team over the more talented, 1 or 2 players in the other team.
Yeah, looking at that matchup, I would hedge it like crazy because you could take the Nets to win outright plus 155. The spread right now in favor of Boston, -4.5 for them. But like you said, Boston's just been killer on defense. They're since January, it's been kind of lights out for them. Number one in offense, also defense, the best record in games against teams over 500 since January. Like you mentioned, Tatum's been just a phenomenal shooter. But do you have concern around the Rob Williams injury and him being out?
Yeah, no, I definitely do, because they put Robert Williams in a really unique spot there for their defense. He was kind of just roaming there, in the front court, and that enabled him to have just a huge impact on the game. He's so athletic. He can block anybody. So he's just sort of popping back and forth. Without him, that's a huge loss. There's no doubt about it. But the one thing that I love about the Celtics, and I think it's another sign of a great coach, is when you just see every player on the court just has the same level of effort. And that's what you see from players off the bench for the Celtics. You see it from their starters. They are playing max defensive effort all the time, which, for those of us who have played basketball, it's easy to have effort on offense, right? Because you're scoring the basketball, it's fun. It's not always easy to have the same effort on defense. We're seeing that game in and game out from the Celtics. So even though it's a concern of mine, I think ultimately this is still going to be a really stellar defense heading into the postseason.
Yeah, those two matchups out east between Sixers and Toronto and Celtics and Nets, those are going to be my two favorite to watch.
Yep.
I think they both could extend into 7-game series. Just looking at how the Nets came in, especially with the two dominant players for the Nets, when Kyrie Irving used to play for the Celtics, and obviously he has some disdain for them now. This is kind of a matchup from last year too. Lots that go into this matchup as well. I think this will be lots of money on this game. But do you have a side here? This is a tough one, I think.
On the series or the next game?
Like it's going game to game is kind of tough, but at least as the opener with Boston as a 4.5-point favorite.
Well, I really like your position. Why not take the Nets as a series underdog, and then maybe try to take the Celtics, in various spots in the series. Obviously, Celtics opening up the series at home, so you could probably make decent returns just betting on the Celtics to cover some of these lines. They're going to be pretty short lines too, and we've seen the Celtics in the fourth quarter. They're not going to let up. Their defense, if anything, is only going to get better, and they're only going to try harder. So I like that hedge, because what's really interesting about this line too is the Nets are still one of the favorites to win the NBA Finals, and yet they're the underdog in this series. So sports books just aren't letting you get a good line on them to win the title, because they still consider them as one of the favorites. I wouldn't take that line, because the Nets are going to have to go through a lot of great teams to get there. But overall, I would definitely favor Boston here. You can still get a pretty decent line, pretty decent value on them here too. Pretty decent value on them to win the East as well. But I don't love the value for the Celtics overall in this series. You might as well just, get more bang for your buck by picking better spots for them in these individual games when they're, in a favorable spot.
Sounds like you're between Milwaukee and Boston to win the East. Who do you like? Who do you like for the series or for the conference?
I like the Bucks. Yeah, the Bucks are just this is a very complete team too, and Giannis is the X factor, right? I mean, there's really no team in the NBA, there's no defense in the NBA that I think is going to be able to stop Giannis when he's locked in the third and fourth quarters, especially. He's been so dominant in those spots, and this is a Bucks team now who has all the playoff experience. They've kind of answered a lot of questions, like, is Chris Middleton a solid number 2? Yes. He's been hitting clutch shots for them. He did it in the playoffs last year, in the finals last year. They have a great defense, and their defense, the stats won't really tell you that, but we've seen the Bucks defense when they want to really shut down the other team and play full effort. They are very, very good. Drew Holiday, one of the best guard defenders in the NBA too. Brook Lopez coming back makes a huge difference for them. They have a great bench. This is just a really, really complete team, and they have the playoff experience. And for my money, they still have the most dominant player in the NBA on their team who's going to be able to turn it up in those big moments. And I don't think he's going to blink an eye when he has to do it. So, the Bucks they're my favorite to win it all still too. I mean, the Suns are a great team. But again, Giannis is kind of the X factor, and I trust him over the Devin Bookers of the world. And I would trust them against the Celtics too. I think all these series will be phenomenal. I think these teams will fight very hard, but I still have to favor the Bucks. It might not be as sexy of a pick. They were there last year, but they are an awfully good team as long as everyone's healthy and as long as they're focused.
Yeah, last year I really wanted it for them. I love the Bucks. I am such a fan of Giannis. I never become like a fan of athletes because I cover them and I interview them, but I am a genuine fan of Giannis. The moment when he sat down and he just looked up with the trophy, that moment just like stands in my head. And the way he did it, getting drafted to Milwaukee, a smaller market, didn't pull LeBron and just get all-stars, switch markets. Like he did it for the team that drafted him, and look where they are now. I think that we could have a repeat Milwaukee Phoenix, and Phoenix looks a lot different this year. Grant, like they were favored, like Chris Paul, he was going to be the MVP of the finals for a bulk of it, and then it was a 180. Like I don't even know how you can explain what happened to him. But Giannis is you can rely on him. He'll show up when you need him to. I don't know if you can say the same about Chris Paul, even Devin Booker at times. Do you think that this will be a repeat of last year? Do you think it'll go towards the Bucks?
Yeah, well, I mean, two big question marks for me for the Suns about that one is, the play of Devin Booker, like you mentioned. He played well in like every other game in the finals. But he had some games in the finals which. This is why I don't give him a nod for like the MVP or like, one of the best players.
I hate props on Devin Booker. I hate taking props on Booker.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and people start comparing him to Kobe Bryant and stuff like, no.
What?
What? Exactly. You have to prove that you can win it all, that you can step up and be the guy to make those shots in the finals and deep in the playoffs. And he did not do that last year in the NBA finals. So until he proves, and he's been great this year, no doubt about it. But until he proves that he can step up in those situations, I'm not going to believe in the Suns, especially over a team like the Bucks. I agree with you about Giannis. The thing that you know about Giannis too is like, he's not a drinker, he's not a partier. Not to get like too intangible.
He didn't go to Vegas when they won. He went to freaking Chick-fil-A and got a 50-piece. Like, how can you not love this guy? Like,
I know.
Oh my
He
gosh,
loves his Slurpee. He loves candy.
Of the NBA. I love that guy.
Yeah, I mean he's like a pure heart. He's going to show up. He's going to give you everything you need, and there's not going to be like any distractions for him. I mean, I don't know if you've heard this story, Stephanie, but like one of his first paychecks, he just sent the entire paycheck home to his family and had to take an Uber drive.
I heard that.
I
heard that he had to get a ride to practice. I have a good friend on the team, and Giannis is like an all-star guy and never treats the guys like he is. I mean, he is one of them. I mean, he's just like a stand-up guy. Like,
yes.
But I will say, when you look at the Suns and Milwaukee, the Suns are playing like they lost the finals because they did. They had it for a part of it, and they lost it. And so they've been playing this whole year like they lost it. Are the Bucks playing like they won it last year? Like, you could take that two ways. Like, oh yeah, we're the defending champs, or we won it last year. We can coast and get right back to the finals, and then they'll show up, but hey.
Yeah. Well, I think the Bucks are playing really smart basketball, actually. They sometimes they don't show the max effort, especially on defense. But it's like, it's almost like they don't want to show all their cards. They don't want to expend all their energy prior to the playoffs. And you kind of can't disagree with that. They're so good that they're still finishing in third in the East, and that's another smart move, right? Because they got to face the Bulls in the first round. I don't think there's a better matchup in the East than facing the Bulls.
I was just going to get to that. I think that they did play it well. They drew the Bulls. I think that's an easy bet there.
Yeah, I mean, I took a futures on the Bucks finishing that series 4-0. The lines have been going down on that one, but the good thing about future lines like that is, even though, I mean, it's tough to be like, oh man, the Bucks are gonna sweep the Bulls. Is that possible, right? Because at least, sometimes these teams at least like drop a game, but every single game that the Bucks face the Bulls, there's so many matchup advantages for the Bucks. They're just playing so much better basketball. I just can't see the Bulls. Like the Bulls would have to shoot like 70% from the floor or something. I just don't see it happening for the Bulls. It's, sad because they started off the season looking fantastic.
Right.
But they just
Right.
don't
They
have
were
the star
competing
power.
with the Heat at the top too. Like,
Yeah.
and then they get hit with the Zach LaVine. Is he healthy? And I don't even know if that will even help them out at this point. I mean, I think the Bucks have it, but a 9.5 point spread. Do you still think the Bucks cover there?
Well, I was looking for a Bucks line right away, so I was disappointed to see that the Bucks were so sharply lined, because that, I mean, I think that line's about right, but I would still probably favor the Bucks. I mean, they're going to be at home. They can't wait to get to the playoffs, and show their best version of who they are. And yeah, the Bulls, they just can't beat good teams, right? We know they have the worst record against teams over 500. They're just not a good team right now. Zach LaVine banged up, Caruso banged up. There's not a lot to like about Chicago. Of course, it's the playoffs. Anything can happen. But the Bucks are probably the most consistent and solid team heading in there, if you ask me.
Yep, I'm with you. For now, I do like that too. I just don't think that they can beat. But do you think that the Bucks will play a bit conservative at the start of the playoffs because of the way Giannis had to play towards the end, banged up?
Yeah, I hope not. I hope that they get ahead, and because if they get that 4-0 sweep, right, then they get a longer break too, right? So that's still good for their team.
Chicago and Milwaukee aren't too far away though either, so they're not traveling far.
That's true.
It's about like an hour drive even. So
yeah, really,
that could help.
It could help, and I just don't think they're going to have any nerves for that series whatsoever. The only thing that could beat the Bucks is the Bucks. If they kind of have a letdown performance, if they're not completely focused for some reason, but there's no signs of that on this team. They're led by Giannis, who we spoke about, is always going to be focused, always going to be in point. Chris Middleton is very much the same way. Drew Holiday is. It's just a team of, sharp professionals, and you don't see that from all NBA teams. You don't know what you're going to get half the time from the James Hardens of the world. Maybe he's out, clubbing the night before or something. So, we can expect consistency from this Bucks team. I can't. I mean, if anybody wants to bet on the Bulls, listen, this is the playoffs. There's still going to be some value probably for them at home. But man, I don't want to put my money on them.
I am just thinking now, Aaron Rodgers, part owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, going into Chicago, I still own you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm already foreseeing it going into Chicago, just saying, I still own you. Oh man, yeah. That is so great. I hope that happens. If it does, I'm literally going to clip this up and I'm going to tweet it everywhere.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Bring in football. I'll talk football for another hour, Stephanie. Don't.
Oh, geez. Me too. I'm getting ready. I'm getting so pumped for football to start. It's my favorite thing to bet on, and it's my favorite sport to cover. So, but I do want to get into to wrap this up. We do want to give you a shout out to Sports Illustrated. They have a new book out, and we have a promo for you guys. I just got to get it pulled up here, but we have a promo for you guys with Sports Illustrated, $300. You can do promo code right here. Sports Illustrated Sportsbook. Hang on, guys. Let me just pull it up really fast. You can get $300 in free bets. Make a bet for only $10. You'll receive a free $10 bet. That's up to 30 times, guys. And it's only new players, though. So make sure you download the Sports Illustrated book. It's for all of you guys out in Colorado. Use promo code ROAD300. Again, ROAD-300. It's a qualifying bet of $10 or more. The minimum odds of minus 150. A free bet token's credited after the bet is settled, and it'll expire after 7 days. You guys can head over to sisportsbook.com. Again, that promo code is ROAD300. You get up to a $10 bet. Guys, 30 times your odds. I think that's pretty good. Take the bet, and we will catch you guys later in the playoffs. Chris Farley, he has probably one of the best records I've seen in NBA betting. So maybe I'll have to take a total because of that. I think your credentials may have helped me there. But thank you so much for joining me. We will definitely have you back on later in the NBA playoffs. And hey, let's see if Aaron Rodgers still owns Chicago. I can't wait for that.
I can't wait for that. Thanks so much, Stephanie. It was great to be on with you.
Thanks. Have a good one.
You too.